What if every person you ever dated only saw dollar signs when they looked at you? What if you could never know if someone's smile was genuine or just calculated? One man faced this nightmare every single day until he made the most dangerous decision of his life. A decision that would either lead him to true love or destroy everything he'd ever built. Before we dive into this incredible story, please drop a comment below telling me where in the world you're watching from, and later, do not forget to give this story a rating from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. The morning fog rolled across San Francisco Bay like a gray blanket, slowly revealing the glittering towers of the financial district. From his penthouse office on the 42nd floor of the Sterling Tower, Alexander Sterling watched the city wake up below him. The Golden Gate Bridge emerged from the mist like a red phoenix, its towers piercing the low-hanging clouds. It was a view that cost him $12 million, but this morning it felt as empty as his bank account was full. Alex ran his hand through his dark hair and loosened his silk tie. At 32, he had everything a man could want. A tech empire worth $800 million, a mansion in Pacific Heights that had been featured in Architectural Digest, and a garage full of luxury cars that he barely drove. What he didn't have was someone to share it with, someone who loved him for who he was, not what he owned. His assistant, Margaret Walsh, knocked on the glass door of his corner office. "Mr. Sterling, your 11 o'clock is here." "Which 11 o'clock?" Alex asked, not turning from the window. "The meeting with the investors from Tokyo about the new AI project." Alex sighed. Another meeting, another $1 million deal, another step further away from any semblance of a normal life. "Give me 5 minutes, Margaret." As she left, Alex's phone buzzed with a text from his best friend and business partner, David Chen. "Dude, you missed poker night again. The guys are starting to think you're dead. Are you coming to Jake's wedding next weekend?" Alex stared at the message. Jake Morrison, their college roommate, was getting married to Sarah, a kindergarten teacher he'd met at a coffee shop in the Mission District. Jake worked as a firefighter and lived in a modest apartment in the Sunset, but he was happier than Alex had ever seen him. The irony wasn't lost on him. Jake, who made $50,000 a year, had found true love, while Alex, with his vast fortune, couldn't find a woman who wasn't interested in his credit card statements. The Tokyo meeting dragged on for 3 hours. Alex's mind wandered as the investors discussed market penetration and profit margins. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, he could see tourists riding the cable cars up Powell Street, couples walking hand-in-hand through Union Square, and families enjoying picnics in the parks. Everyone seemed to be living while he was just existing. After the meeting, Alex drove his Tesla through the winding streets of Pacific Heights to his mansion, a Victorian masterpiece that had been in his family for 3 generations. The house boasted 12 bedrooms, a wine cellar, and a view of the bay that real estate agents called priceless. But as he walked through the marble-floored foyer, his footsteps echoing in the empty space, it felt more like a museum than a home. He poured himself a glass of 30-year-old scotch and sat in his study, surrounded by first-edition books he'd never read and awards he'd never celebrated. On his desk sat a photo of his parents, both killed in a car accident when he was 25. They had built Sterling Technologies from nothing, and Alex had inherited not just their wealth, but their work ethic and their dreams. He'd tripled the company's value in 7 years, but success felt hollow without someone to share it with. His phone rang. The caller ID showed Mom with a heart emoji, his code name for his housekeeper, Rosa Martinez, who had been with the family for 20 years and was the closest thing to a mother he had left. "Alex, mijo, are you eating?" Rosa's voice carried the warmth of someone who genuinely cared. "I'm fine, Rosa. I grabbed something at the office." "A granola bar is not food. I left lasagna in the refrigerator. Heat it up properly, not in that microwave." Alex smiled despite himself. Rosa was one of the few people who treated him like a person, not a bank account. "I will, I promise." "And Alex, you need to get out of that house. Find a nice girl. Have some fun. Money can't keep you warm at night." After hanging up, Alex wandered to his bedroom balcony. The sun was setting over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Couples were walking along Crissy Field below, and he could hear the distant sound of laughter from the marina green. He thought about Rosa's words and realized she was right. He was 32 years old, successful beyond his wildest dreams, and completely alone. That night, Alex did something he hadn't done in years. He walked. He left his mansion and strolled through the streets of his neighborhood, past the painted ladies of Alamo Square, through the bustling energy of Fillmore Street, and down to the marina. The city felt different at street level, more alive, more real. He ended up at a small cafe called the Daily Grind in the Mission District, a place he'd never noticed during his rare trips to the area. The coffee shop was packed with young professionals, artists and students. The walls were covered with local artwork, and the barista, a girl with purple hair and multiple piercings, greeted every customer like an old friend. Alex ordered a simple coffee and sat at a corner table, watching the people around him. At the next table, a couple was sharing a piece of cheesecake, laughing about something on the woman's phone. They looked happy, genuinely happy, in a way that had nothing to do with money or status. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world," said a voice beside him. Alex looked up to see an elderly man with kind eyes and a weathered face. He was wearing a flannel shirt and work boots, and his hands showed the calluses of someone who worked with them. "Maybe I am," Alex replied. "I'm Frank Murphy. I've been a mason in this city for 40 years, built half the buildings in Soma." The old man extended a calloused hand. "And you are?" "Alex Sterling." Alex shook his hand, surprised by the strength in Frank's grip. "Sterling? Like the tower downtown?" Alex nodded, expecting the usual change in demeanor that came with recognition. Instead, Frank just smiled. "Must be nice to have all that success," Frank said. "But you know what I've learned in 40 years of laying bricks. The strongest foundations are built one stone at a time, with your own hands. Everything else is just decoration." They talked for an hour about the city, about work, about life. Frank told stories about the buildings he'd helped construct, the neighborhoods he'd watched change, the pride he felt in creating something lasting with his hands. When Frank finally left, he clasped Alex's shoulder. "You know, son, sometimes the best things in life come when you're not looking for them. Maybe try being someone else for a while. See what happens." Alex walked home through the fog-shrouded streets, Frank's words echoing in his mind. Back in his mansion, he sat in his study and stared at his reflection in the dark window. The man looking back at him had everything money could buy, but he looked tired, lonely, and somehow smaller than he should. That's when the idea struck him. What if he could be someone else? What if he could meet someone who would love him for who he was, not what he owned? What if he could build something real, one stone at a time, just like Frank had said? Alex opened his laptop and began typing. He created a new profile on a dating app, but this time he wasn't Alexander Sterling, tech mogul and heir to a fortune. He was Alex Stone, a mason who worked with his hands and lived simply. He used a photo of himself in casual clothes, taken during a rare weekend when he'd helped Rosa's nephew move apartments. In the picture, he looked relaxed, genuine, and happy. As he filled out the profile, Alex felt something he hadn't experienced in years: excitement. For the first time in his adult life, he was going to be judged not by his bank account, but by his character. He was going to find out who Alex Sterling really was beneath all the money and success. The fog had lifted outside, and the city lights twinkled like stars. Alex looked out at San Francisco, the city where he'd been born and raised, and felt like he was seeing it for the first time. Tomorrow, he would begin a new chapter in his life, one built on honesty, hope, and the possibility of real love. He closed the laptop and smiled. For the first time in years, he was looking forward to tomorrow. The next morning, Alex woke up to the sound of his phone buzzing with notifications. For a moment he panicked, thinking his dating profile had somehow been discovered by the tech blogs that loved to dissect his personal life. Instead, he found 12 matches from women who had responded to Alex Stone Mason. His first instinct was to delete the app entirely. What had seemed like a brilliant idea at midnight now felt like an elaborate lie that could destroy his reputation and his company. But then he remembered Frank Murphy's weathered hands and genuine smile, and Rosa's words about finding someone who would love him for who he was. Alex made himself coffee in his state-of-the-art kitchen and sat at his marble island, scrolling through the messages. Most were simple hello or how are you, but one caught his attention. A woman named Jessica Parker had written, "I love that you work with your hands. There's something so authentic about creating things that last. What's your favorite project you've worked on?" Alex stared at the message for 10 minutes. What was his favorite project? Building Sterling Technologies didn't count. Alex Stone wouldn't know about that. He thought about the time he'd helped Rosa's nephew renovate his apartment, how satisfying it had been to see the transformation from broken to beautiful. He typed back, "I helped restore a Victorian house in the Mission last year. Seeing the old architecture come back to life was incredible. What do you do?" The response came quickly. "I'm a yoga instructor in the Marina District. I teach sunrise classes on the beach sometimes. You should come try it." Alex laughed out loud. He had spent $30,000 on a private gym in his house that he rarely used, and now a woman was inviting him to exercise on the beach for free. "I'd like that," he typed back. They agreed to meet that Saturday at a coffee shop called Been There, Done That in the Haight-Ashbury district. Alex had never been to the Haight, despite living in San Francisco his entire life. His world had been limited to the financial district, Pacific Heights, and the occasional business dinner in Union Square. The rest of the week passed in a blur of meetings and preparations. Alex found himself researching masonry during lunch breaks, watching YouTube videos about bricklaying techniques, and practicing construction terminology. He bought work clothes from a store in the Mission, jeans, flannel shirts, and steel-toed boots. When he looked in the mirror wearing them, he barely recognized himself. Margaret noticed the change immediately. "Mr. Sterling, you seem different this week. More energetic." "Just trying something new," Alex said, avoiding her curious gaze. On Friday evening, David Chen stopped by the office. "Dude, you look like you haven't slept in days. Are you okay?" Alex considered telling his best friend about the plan, but decided against it. David would either try to talk him out of it, or find it so amusing that he'd accidentally reveal the secret. "I'm fine. Just working on a new project." "Well, whatever it is, it's making you weird. Good weird, but weird." Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crystal-clear sky that made San Francisco postcards famous. Alex drove his Tesla to within a few blocks of the coffee shop, then parked and walked the rest of the way. He couldn't risk being seen getting out of a car that cost more than most people's annual salary. The Haight-Ashbury was a revelation. The streets were lined with vintage clothing stores, record shops, and cafes that looked like they hadn't changed since the 1960s. Street musicians played on corners, and the air smelled like incense and fresh bread. Alex felt like he'd discovered a hidden neighborhood in his own city. Been There, Done That was a cozy space with mismatched furniture and walls covered in local artwork. Alex ordered a simple coffee and found a table by the window. He was 10 minutes early, which gave him time to observe the Saturday morning crowd. Unlike the suits and smartphones of the financial district, people here seemed relaxed, unhurried, focused on conversations rather than deals. "Alex?" A woman's voice made him turn. Jessica Parker was exactly as beautiful as her photos suggested, with long blonde hair and the kind of athletic build that came from actually using her body, not just maintaining it. She wore yoga pants and a simple sweater, and her smile was genuinely warm. "Jessica, hi." Alex stood up, almost knocking over his chair. "Thanks for meeting me." "Are you nervous?" she asked, sitting down across from him. "It's okay if you are. First dates are always weird." "A little," Alex admitted. "I don't do this often." "What, drink coffee?" Jessica laughed. "Or date?" "Both, actually." The conversation flowed easily at first. Jessica talked about her yoga classes, her love of hiking in Marin County, and her dream of opening her own studio. Alex found himself relaxing, enjoying the simple pleasure of talking to someone who wasn't trying to sell him anything or get something from him. "So tell me about your work," Jessica said. "What kind of projects do you usually do?" Alex's mind went blank. He'd prepared for this question, but suddenly every construction term he'd memorized disappeared. "Well, I work on houses mostly, residential stuff." "That's so cool. I bet you have amazing stories about the people you work for." "Oh yes, definitely, some very interesting clients." Alex took a sip of coffee to buy time. And what about you, any crazy yoga students? You wouldn't believe some of the people who come to my classes. There's this one guy who always wears a three-piece suit to yoga. A three-piece suit? Can you imagine trying to do downward dog in a vest? Alex nearly choked on his coffee. He owned 12 three-piece suits and had never considered that they might be inappropriate for physical activity. That does sound impractical. Right? I mean, who wears a suit to exercise? He's probably some uptight businessman who thinks money can solve everything. Alex nodded enthusiastically while dying inside. Those types are the worst. The conversation continued for another hour, and Alex found himself genuinely enjoying Jessica's company. She was intelligent, funny, and passionate about her work. But as they talked, he began to notice something troubling. Every time he mentioned his work, she became more animated, asking about his authentic lifestyle and how refreshing it was to meet someone who worked with his hands. "I'm so tired of dating guys who only care about money," Jessica said, stirring her latte. "I want someone real, you know, someone who builds things instead of just shuffling papers around." "Absolutely," Alex agreed, feeling increasingly uncomfortable. "I dated this tech guy once. He took me to a restaurant that cost more than my monthly rent, and then spent the whole dinner talking about his stock options. So boring. I need someone who understands the value of simple things." They decided to walk through Golden Gate Park after coffee. The park was alive with Saturday activities, families having picnics, couples playing frisbee, artists painting landscapes. Alex realized he'd driven past the park thousands of times, but had never actually walked through it. "This is my favorite spot in the city," Jessica said as they approached the Japanese tea garden. "It's so peaceful. I come here when I need to think." They sat on a bench overlooking the koi pond, and Jessica turned to face him. "I have to say, Alex, this is the best first date I've had in years. You're so different from the guys I usually meet." "Different how?" "You're present. You're not checking your phone every 5 minutes or talking about your portfolio. You seem like you actually enjoy simple pleasures." Alex looked around the garden, at the carefully maintained bridges and pagodas, at the couples feeding the fish, at the simple joy on people's faces. "I'm starting to," he said, and meant it. "Would you like to come to my beach yoga class tomorrow morning? It's at 6 a.m. at Crissy Field. I know it's early, but watching the sunrise over the bay is incredible." "I'd love to," Alex said, then immediately panicked. He had never done yoga in his life, and 6 a.m. was earlier than he'd woken up in years. They exchanged numbers and agreed to meet at the beach. As Jessica walked away, Alex felt a mixture of exhilaration and terror. The date had gone well, better than well. Jessica was exactly the kind of woman he'd been hoping to meet, but she was also falling for a version of him that didn't exist. Walking back to his car, Alex passed a construction site where real masons were working on a new building. He watched them for a few minutes, admiring their skill and efficiency. One of the workers noticed him staring. "You looking for work?" the man asked. "Just watching," Alex said. "Impressive craftsmanship. Been doing this for 20 years. There's something satisfying about building something that'll last longer than you will." Alex nodded, thinking about Frank Murphy's words. Maybe there was something to be said for creating things with your hands, for building something real and lasting. That evening, Alex stood in his mansion's gym, trying to follow a yoga video on his phone. He fell over during the first pose, got tangled up in the second, and gave up entirely during the third. This was going to be a disaster. But as he looked out at the city lights twinkling below, he realized he didn't care. For the first time in years, he was excited about tomorrow. He was excited about the possibility of connection, of building something real with someone who might actually love him for who he was, or at least who he was pretending to be. The moral complexity of his deception weighed on him, but Alex pushed the guilt aside. He would figure out how to tell Jessica the truth eventually. For now, he just wanted to enjoy being someone who could make a woman smile without opening his wallet. Tomorrow he would wake up at 5 a.m., drive to Crissy Field and attempt yoga on the beach. It was the most terrifying and exciting prospect he'd faced in years. Alex's alarm went off at 5 a.m., a sound so foreign to his usual routine that he initially thought it was a fire alarm. He stumbled out of his king-sized bed, his body protesting the early hour, and looked out at the pre-dawn darkness over San Francisco Bay. The city was still asleep, streetlights creating golden pools along the empty streets below. He had spent the previous evening watching yoga videos until midnight, his designer furniture pushed aside to create space for his clumsy attempts at downward dog. Rosa had found him in the living room, contorted in what he thought was warrior pose, but looked more like a pretzel having an identity crisis. "Mijo, what are you doing?" she had asked, setting down her cleaning supplies. "Yoga," Alex had replied, trying to maintain his balance. "That's not yoga, I don't know what that is, but it's not yoga." Rosa had spent an hour teaching him basic poses, her patience infinite, as Alex struggled with movements that seemed to require more flexibility than his 32-year-old body possessed. "Remember," she had said, "yoga is about finding balance, not about looking perfect." Now, standing in his marble bathroom at dawn, Alex hoped that philosophy would apply to his entire life. He dressed in the workout clothes he'd bought specifically for this occasion, athletic shorts, a simple t-shirt, and sneakers that had never touched pavement. Looking in the mirror, he barely recognized himself. Gone was the polished executive in tailored suits. In his place stood someone who looked almost normal. The drive to Crissy Field took him through the sleeping city, past the all-night diners in the Mission, where early shift workers grabbed coffee, past the joggers already making their way through the Marina district. Alex had never seen San Francisco at this hour, and there was something magical about the quiet streets and the way the morning light began to paint the buildings in soft pastels. Crissy Field stretched out before him like a green carpet, with the Golden Gate Bridge rising majestically in the background. The bay was calm, reflecting the pre-dawn sky like a mirror. Alex could see a small group of people setting up yoga mats near the water, their movements fluid and practiced. Jessica spotted him immediately and waved. She was wearing form-fitting yoga pants and a sports bra, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked like she belonged here, like she was part of the landscape itself. "You made it," she said, giving him a quick hug. "I wasn't sure you'd actually show up this early." "I'm full of surprises," Alex replied, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. "Do you have a mat?" Jessica asked, looking around him. Alex's face fell. In all his preparation, he had forgotten the most basic requirement. No, I usually just use the ground." Jessica laughed. "The ground works too, but sand and yoga don't mix well. Here, I brought an extra." She handed him a purple mat that was clearly well used, with worn edges and faded spots. "Thank you. This is really thoughtful. My ex-boyfriend left it at my apartment 6 months ago. His loss is your gain." They found a spot near the water, and Alex tried to copy Jessica's movements as she unrolled her mat. Around them, about 15 other people were doing the same, all moving with the casual efficiency of regular practitioners. Alex felt like an imposter among initiates. "Okay, everyone," Jessica called out, her voice carrying easily over the sound of gentle waves. "We're going to start with some basic sun salutations to warm up. Remember, this is your practice. Listen to your body." Alex tried to listen to his body, but his body seemed to be screaming in languages he didn't understand. The sun salutation, which looked so graceful when Jessica demonstrated it, became a comedy of errors when Alex attempted it. His downward dog looked more like a collapsing bridge, his warrior pose resembled someone flagging down a taxi, and his tree pose lasted about as long as a tree in a hurricane. "You're trying too hard," Jessica said softly, moving to adjust his position. Her hands were warm on his shoulders, and Alex felt a flutter of attraction that had nothing to do with yoga. "Just breathe." As the sun began to rise over the bay, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Alex found himself relaxing despite his physical awkwardness. There was something peaceful about the rhythmic sound of waves, the gentle guidance of Jessica's voice, and the simple act of moving his body in the fresh morning air. "Now we're going to try a partner pose," Jessica announced. "Find someone near you, and we'll do back-to-back breathing." Before Alex could panic about the implications, Jessica had positioned herself behind him, her back pressed against his. "Just breathe naturally," she said. "Feel the rhythm of your partner's breathing." Alex tried to focus on his breathing, but he was acutely aware of Jessica's warmth, the subtle scent of her shampoo, the way their bodies moved together in perfect synchronization. For a moment, he forgot about his deception, his wealth, his complicated life. He was just Alex, sitting on a beach at sunrise with a beautiful woman breathing. "This is nice," Jessica murmured. "Very nice," Alex agreed. After the class ended, they walked along the beach as the city began to wake up. Joggers passed them on the path, and early commuters were already heading toward the financial district. Alex felt a pang of guilt as he watched them go. He should be among them, preparing for another day of meetings and decisions. "Oh, you're a natural," Jessica said, though both of them knew she was being kind. "How long have you been practicing?" "Not long," Alex replied, which was technically true. "I'm still learning." "I love that you're trying new things. Most guys are so set in their routines." They stopped at a food truck called Sunrise Sandwiches that had parked near the beach. The owner, a middle-aged man with a genuine smile, greeted Jessica like an old friend. "The usual, Jessica?" he asked. "2 breakfast burritos, please, extra salsa on mine." Alex reached for his wallet, but Jessica waved him off. "My treat. You showed up at 6 a.m. for yoga. That deserves a reward." As they ate their burritos on a bench overlooking the bay, Alex marveled at how different this felt from his usual breakfast routine. Instead of eating a protein bar while reading financial reports in his office, he was watching seagulls fight over scraps while talking to someone who seemed genuinely interested in his thoughts. "So, what's your story?" Jessica asked. "Are you from San Francisco?" "Born and raised," Alex said, "though I feel like I'm just starting to really explore the city." "What do you mean?" Alex gestured around them. "I've lived here my whole life, but I've never done yoga on the beach. I've never eaten breakfast from a food truck. I've never watched the sunrise from Crissy Field. What have you been doing instead?" "Working, mostly. I got caught up in the grind and forgot to actually live." Jessica nodded thoughtfully. "I see that a lot. People get so focused on making money that they forget what they're making it for." "Exactly," Alex said, feeling a sharp pang of recognition. "That's why I love what I do. Yoga isn't about achieving anything or competing with anyone. It's about being present, finding balance, appreciating what you have. Is that why you became an instructor?" Jessica's expression grew more serious. "I used to work in marketing for a tech company. Long hours, high stress, good money. I thought I was living the dream, but I was miserable. I quit 2 years ago to pursue yoga full-time. Do you regret it?" "Never. I make about a quarter of what I used to make, but I'm actually happy. I wake up excited about my day instead of dreading it." Alex studied her face, seeing the contentment there, the peace that seemed to radiate from her. "That's brave." "It's not brave. It's just honest. Life's too short to spend it doing things that don't fulfill you." They walked back toward the Marina District, and Alex found himself reluctant to end the morning. Jessica had a way of making the ordinary feel extraordinary, of finding joy in simple pleasures. He wanted to bottle this feeling, to carry it with him back to his corporate world. "I have to teach another class at 10, Jessica said as they reached the street where they'd parked. "But I had a really nice time." "Me too. Really nice. Would you like to do something this weekend? There's a farmer's market in the Mission on Saturday." "I know it's not very exciting, but—" "I'd love to," Alex interrupted. "It sounds perfect." Jessica smiled and stood on her tiptoes to kiss his cheek. "You're different from anyone I've ever met, Alex Stone." As she walked away, Alex touched his cheek where she'd kissed him. He felt different too, though he wasn't sure if it was because of Jessica or because of the person he was pretending to be. The drive back to Pacific Heights took him through the awakening city, past the coffee shops filling with morning customers, past the commuters heading to jobs that suddenly seemed less important than a sunrise on the beach. Alex's phone buzzed with texts from Margaret about his morning meetings, from David about a dinner invitation, from various business contacts about deals and opportunities. He ignored them all. Back in his mansion, Alex stood in his marble shower, letting the hot water wash away the sand and salt from the beach. But he couldn't wash away the feeling that he was living a double life, that every moment of connection with Jessica was built on a foundation of lies. In his closet, he stared at the row of expensive suits hanging like armor, then at the simple clothes he'd worn to yoga. For the first time in his life, he wasn't sure which version of himself was real. His phone rang, and Alex saw it was his assistant. "Mr. Sterling, you missed the 9 o'clock meeting with the venture capitalists. They're asking if we can reschedule." "Reschedule," Alex said without hesitation. "In fact, clear my morning. I need some time to think." "Are you feeling all right, sir?" Alex looked out his window at the city below, at the beach where he'd spent the morning, at the life he was building one lie at a time. "I'm feeling more all right than I have in years, Margaret. That's the problem." Saturday morning found Alex standing in front of his walk-in closet, which was larger than most people's bedrooms, staring at clothes that suddenly felt like costumes. The farmers' market in the Mission District was uncharted territory for someone who usually had his groceries delivered by a high-end service that specialized in organic, locally sourced ingredients he never actually saw. He selected a pair of well-worn jeans and a flannel shirt, then caught sight of himself in the full-length mirror. The reflection showed someone who looked relaxed, approachable, normal. It was unsettling how comfortable he was becoming in this new skin. Rosa appeared in the doorway carrying fresh towels. "You look happy, mijo, different but happy." "Different how?" "Lighter, like you're not carrying the world on your shoulders anymore." She set down the towels and studied his face. "Is there a girl?" Alex felt heat rise in his cheeks. "Maybe." "Good. It's about time. Just remember." Rosa wagged a finger at him. "The heart doesn't care about money. Love is love, rich or poor." If only it were that simple, Alex thought as he drove toward the Mission District. The irony of Rosa's words wasn't lost on him. He was potentially falling for someone who would hate him if she knew who he really was. The Mission Farmers Market sprawled across several blocks of 24th Street, transforming the urban landscape into a vibrant celebration of local agriculture. Alex had driven past this area countless times on his way to business meetings, but he'd never stopped to experience the community that thrived here. Vendors had set up colorful stalls, selling everything from heirloom tomatoes to artisanal cheese, from fresh-cut flowers to handmade soaps. The air was filled with the scent of fresh bread, roasting coffee, and something deliciously spicy from a food truck specializing in pupusas. Street musicians played on corners, their guitar cases open for donations, and families strolled between stalls with reusable bags and genuine smiles. Alex found Jessica at a produce stand, examining avocados with the focused attention of a jeweler evaluating diamonds. She wore a sundress and sandals, her hair flowing loose around her shoulders, and she looked so naturally beautiful that Alex felt his breath catch. "You have to test for ripeness," she explained when she saw him approaching. "Firm but with just a little give when you press gently." "I usually just grab whatever looks green," Alex admitted. "Where do you usually shop?" Alex panicked. He couldn't exactly say that his housekeeper bought groceries from a service that cost more per week than many people spent on rent. "Corner stores mostly, quick and convenient." Jessica made a face. "No wonder you don't know about avocados. Come on, let me show you around. This place is amazing." For the next 2 hours, Jessica led Alex through a world he never knew existed in his own city. They sampled honey from a beekeeper who explained the difference between wildflower and clover varieties. They bought fresh herbs from a farmer who grew them in a rooftop garden in the Castro. They listened to a violinist who played classical music with such passion that a small crowd gathered, dropping bills and coins into his case. "This is my favorite stand," Jessica said, stopping at a booth run by an elderly woman with kind eyes and soil-stained hands. "Maria grows the most incredible strawberries." "Jessica, mi amor," Maria exclaimed, embracing her warmly. "And who is this handsome man?" "This is Alex. Alex, meet Maria Santos. She's been farming in the Central Valley for 40 years. Alex shook Maria's weathered hand, noticing the calluses that spoke of decades of hard work. "It's a pleasure to meet you. You have good taste in women," Maria said with a wink. "And Jessica has good taste in men. You both look happy." As they sampled strawberries that were so perfectly sweet they seemed like nature's candy, Alex found himself drawn into conversation with Maria about farming, about the challenges of drought and climate change, about the satisfaction of growing food that nourished communities. It was a world completely removed from his usual concerns about profit margins and market share. "You know," Maria said to Alex, You remind me of my grandson. He works construction in the city. There's something about men who work with their hands. They understand the value of creating something real. Alex felt the familiar weight of his deception, but forced a smile. Thank you, that means a lot. They bought a basket of strawberries and continued through the market. Jessica introduced Alex to vendors she'd known for years, treating each interaction like a conversation with an old friend. There was Carlos, who sold the best coffee in the city from a cart decorated with photos of his farm in Guatemala. There was Sarah, a former tech worker who now made artisanal soaps and talked about finding peace in simple ingredients. Everyone here has a story, Jessica said as they sat on a bench, sharing a breakfast burrito from a vendor who specialized in locally sourced ingredients. That's what I love about this place. It's not just about buying food, it's about connection, community. You know everyone, Alex observed. I've been coming here for 3 years, ever since I quit my corporate job. At first I just came for the produce, but then I started talking to people, learning their stories. Now it feels like family. Alex watched the interactions around them, strangers becoming friends over shared samples, children laughing as they chased each other between stalls, vendors helping each other during busy periods. It was a kind of community he'd never experienced, despite living in San Francisco his entire life. What was your corporate job like? Alex asked, curious about Jessica's previous life. Jessica's expression darkened slightly. I worked for a tech startup in Soma, marketing and business development, 60-hour weeks, constant pressure to hit targets, office politics that made Game of Thrones look like a children's show. Sounds familiar, Alex said carefully. The worst part was the culture. Everything was about money. How much we were making, how much we were worth, how much our stock options might be worth someday. People stopped being people and became resources, assets, revenue streams. Alex felt each word like a small knife. Jessica was describing his world with the accuracy of someone who'd lived it and the disdain of someone who'd escaped it. I had this boss, Jessica continued, her voice taking on a bitter edge. He was probably 30-something, heir to some family fortune, thought he was God's gift to business. He'd roll up to the office in cars that cost more than my annual salary, talking about disruption and innovation. But he had no idea what it was like to actually struggle. He sounds terrible, Alex managed. The worst part was that he wasn't even competent. He'd inherited everything and thought that made him smart. Meanwhile, people who actually knew what they were doing were getting laid off to improve the bottom line. Alex's breakfast burrito suddenly tasted like sawdust. Jessica could have been describing him, or any of a dozen tech executives he knew. The realization that he was exactly the type of person she'd learned to despise was like a physical blow. I'm sorry you had to deal with that, he said. It's okay. It taught me what I don't want in life. I'd rather make an honest living doing something I love than get rich making other people miserable. They walked to a small park where a band was setting up for an impromptu concert. Jessica spread out a blanket she'd bought from one of the vendors, and they lay back to listen to the music. The sun was warm on Alex's face, and Jessica's hand found his, their fingers intertwining naturally. This is perfect, Jessica said softly. Alex wanted to agree, but perfection built on lies felt like a house of cards in an earthquake. Every moment of happiness was shadowed by the knowledge that Jessica was falling for someone who didn't exist. Can I ask you something? Jessica said, turning to face him. Of course. What do you want out of life, like your biggest dreams? The question hit Alex like a truck. 6 months ago, he would have answered with expansion plans, acquisition targets, maybe something about market dominance. But lying here in the park, listening to street musicians and holding hands with a woman who valued authenticity above everything else, those dreams seemed hollow. I want to build something that matters, Alex said slowly. Something that lasts. I want to wake up excited about my day instead of dreading it. What would that look like? Alex closed his eyes, trying to imagine a life that felt authentic. Maybe a small business, something where I could know my customers, where I could see the direct impact of my work, maybe teaching young people a trade, passing on knowledge. Jessica squeezed his hand. That sounds beautiful and completely achievable. If only she knew, Alex thought, that he had the resources to make any dream come true, but had somehow lost the ability to dream at all. As the afternoon wound down, they walked back through the market, which was beginning to close. Vendors were packing up their remaining produce, offering end-of-day discounts to regular customers. Jessica bought vegetables for the week, and Alex found himself helping carry her bags, playing the part of the helpful boyfriend. "I had the best time today," Jessica said as they reached her car, a 10-year-old Honda Civic with a few dents and a bumper sticker that read, "Namaste." "Me too. Thank you for showing me all of this. Would you like to come over for dinner tomorrow? I could cook something with all these amazing vegetables." "I'd love that." Jessica kissed him goodbye, a soft, sweet kiss that made Alex forget about everything else for a moment. But as he walked to his own car, parked several blocks away to avoid suspicion, the weight of his deception settled back on his shoulders. That evening, Alex sat in his home office, looking out at the city lights while nursing a glass of wine that cost more than most people spent on groceries in a month. On his desk was his phone, showing 17 missed calls from business associates, 43 emails marked urgent, and a text from David asking if he was still alive. But all Alex could think about was Maria's strawberries, the street musicians in the park, and the way Jessica's face lit up when she talked about the community she'd found at the farmer's market. He thought about her bitter words about her former boss, about the kind of man she'd learned to despise, about the growing certainty that he was falling in love with someone who would hate him if she knew the truth. Alex opened his laptop and stared at his calendar for the coming week. Board meetings, investor calls, product launches, the machinery of his empire demanding his attention. But for the first time in his life, none of it seemed important compared to the simple prospect of having dinner with a woman who made him want to be a better person. He closed the laptop and walked to his bedroom, where his reflection in the mirror showed a man caught between two worlds, unsure which one was real and terrified of what would happen when the truth finally came out. Alex spent Sunday morning in a state of nervous energy that would have been comical if it weren't so genuine. He had attended board meetings with Fortune 500 CEOs, pitched to venture capitalists worth billions, and negotiated deals that made international headlines. But the prospect of dinner at Jessica's apartment had him pacing his mansion like a caged animal. The problem wasn't just the dinner itself, it was the growing weight of his deception. Every conversation with Jessica revealed how much she valued authenticity, how deeply she despised the world he actually inhabited. He was falling in love with someone who would be horrified by his true identity, and the irony was becoming unbearable. Rosa found him reorganizing his sock drawer for the third time that morning. "Mijo, you're going to wear a hole in the floor. What's wrong?" "I'm having dinner with Jessica tonight," Alex said, holding up two identical black socks as if they required serious consideration. "That's wonderful. Why do you look like you're going to a funeral?" Alex sat on the edge of his bed, the weight of his lies suddenly overwhelming. "Rosa, what if someone you cared about would hate you if they knew who you really were?" Rosa's expression softened, and she sat beside him. "Alex, I've known you since you were 12 years old. You're a good man. Sometimes you forget that because you're surrounded by money and business, but underneath all of that you have a kind heart. But what if that's not enough? What if the money and business are all she can see? Then she's not the right woman for you. But maybe, Mijo, the problem isn't who you are. Maybe it's who you think you have to be." Alex pondered Rosa's words as he drove through the city toward Jessica's apartment in the Richmond district. He had chosen his outfit carefully, jeans, a simple sweater, and work boots that he'd actually scuffed up in his garage to make them look authentic. Every detail of his appearance was calculated to support his lie, and the effort exhausted him. Jessica's building was a modest 3-story Victorian that had been converted into apartments. It was the kind of place Alex would have walked past without noticing 6 months ago, but now it struck him as charming, full of character that his sterile mansion lacked. Her apartment was on the 2nd floor, and Alex could smell something incredible wafting down the hallway as he climbed the stairs. He knocked on the door marked 2B, and Jessica answered, wearing an apron over casual clothes, her hair pulled back, flour dusting her cheek. "Perfect timing," she said, standing on her tiptoes to kiss him hello. "I just pulled the bread out of the oven." Alex stepped into her apartment and felt like he'd entered a different world. The space was small, probably the size of his walk-in closet, but it was warm and lived in. Books lined every available wall, plants crowded the windowsills, and artwork from local artists covered the walls. The furniture was mismatched but comfortable, clearly chosen for function rather than fashion. "I love your place," Alex said, and meant it. "It feels like a home." "Thank you, it's not much, but it's mine. Well, I share it with Mr. Whiskers." As if summoned by his name, an enormous orange cat appeared from the kitchen, regarding Alex with the suspicious intelligence that all cats seem to possess. "Mr. Whiskers, meet Alex. Alex, meet my roommate and harshest critic." Alex extended his hand, and the cat sniffed it cautiously before deciding he was acceptable. "He's beautiful. I rescued him 2 years ago. He was living behind the yoga studio, all skin and bones. Now look at him. He's basically a furry Ottoman with attitude." The kitchen was tiny but efficient, and Jessica moved through it with the grace of someone who actually cooked regularly. She had prepared a vegetable curry using ingredients from the farmer's market, fresh naan bread that she'd made from scratch, and a simple salad with the strawberries they'd bought from Maria. "Can I help with anything?" Alex asked. "Just keep me company. Tell me about your week." Alex's week had actually involved acquiring a startup for $50 million, attending a charity gala where he donated more money than most people earned in a lifetime, and having lunch with a senator who was seeking campaign contributions. Instead, he said, "Pretty quiet. A few small jobs. Nothing exciting." What kind of jobs? Alex's mind raced. He'd been dreading this moment all week. Brick repair on a house in the Castro. Some foundation work in the Sunset. That must be satisfying, fixing things that are broken. "Very," Alex said, and realized it wasn't entirely a lie. There was something appealing about the idea of fixing things with his hands, of solving problems in the physical world rather than the abstract realm of finance and technology. They sat at her small dining table, which was set with mismatched plates and cloth napkins that had clearly been used and loved for years. The curry was delicious, complex and warming, and Alex found himself savoring every bite in a way he hadn't done with food in years. "This is incredible," he said. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" "My grandmother taught me. She came from India when she was young and said that food was the language of love. Every dish tells a story." "What story does this tell?" Jessica smiled. "This tells the story of taking time to do things right, of using simple ingredients to create something nourishing, of sharing what you have with people you care about." Alex felt a lump form in his throat. When was the last time someone had cooked for him? Rosa prepared meals, but those were part of her job. This was different. This was someone choosing to nourish him, to share her time and skill because she cared about him. "My turn for a question," Jessica said, refilling their glasses with wine that probably cost $10 and tasted better than the $100 bottles in Alex's cellar. "What's your family like?" The question hit Alex unexpectedly. "My parents died 7 years ago, car accident." Jessica's face immediately filled with compassion. "Oh, Alex, I'm so sorry. I can't imagine how difficult that must have been. They were good people. They worked hard, built something from nothing." Alex realized he was talking about his parents honestly for the first time in years, not as the founders of Sterling Technologies, but as the people who had raised him. "My mother would have loved you." "What was she like?" "Strong, independent. She grew up poor but never let that define her. She used to say that character wasn't about what you had, but about what you did with whatever you were given." "She sounds wonderful." "She was. She would have appreciated someone like you, someone who chose happiness over money." After dinner, they settled on Jessica's small couch with Mr. Whiskers positioned strategically between them. Jessica put on a playlist of acoustic music, and they talked about everything and nothing, favorite books, childhood memories, dreams for the future. "Can I tell you something?" Jessica said, curling her legs under her. "Anything." "I was nervous about tonight. Really nervous." "Why?" "Because I really like you, and I haven't really liked anyone in a long time. After my corporate job, after dating all those guys who only cared about success and status, I started to think maybe I was too picky. Maybe I wanted something that didn't exist." Alex felt his heart breaking and soaring simultaneously. "What changed your mind?" "You did. You're so present. You listen when I talk. You seem interested in simple things, real things. You don't check your phone every 5 minutes or talk about your portfolio or try to impress me with expensive restaurants." Each word was like a dagger. Alex was exactly the type of man Jessica thought she'd escaped, and here she was, falling for an illusion he'd created. "Jessica, Wait, let me finish. I know we haven't known each other long, but I feel something with you that I've never felt before. Like I can be completely myself. Like you see me, really see me, not just what I can do for you or how I might fit into your life." Alex's throat felt tight. "You can be yourself with me. Always. Can you be yourself with me?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Alex looked into Jessica's eyes, seeing the trust there, the openness, the beginning of love. He wanted to tell her everything, about his company, his wealth, his real name. He wanted to explain that he'd started this deception not to hurt her, but to find exactly what they'd found together. Instead, he said, "I'm trying to be." They kissed then, soft and sweet, and Alex felt like he was betraying her even as he lost himself in the moment. Mr. Whiskers, apparently disgusted by the display of affection, stalked off to the bedroom with an air of feline superiority. "I should probably go," Alex said reluctantly as the evening grew late. "Early morning tomorrow. Another construction job?" "Something like that." Jessica walked him to the door and they lingered in the hallway, neither wanting the evening to end. "Alex, can I ask you something that might sound strange?" "Of course." "Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's life? Like the real you is buried under expectations and circumstances?" Alex's breath caught. "Every day. I felt that way for years. That's why I changed everything. My job, my lifestyle, my priorities. It was terrifying, but it was the best decision I ever made." What if changing everything meant losing the people you cared about? Then they didn't really care about you to begin with. The people who matter will love you for who you are, not who you pretend to be. As Alex drove home through the empty streets of San Francisco, Jessica's words echoed in his mind. The city looked different at night, more honest somehow, stripped of its daytime pretenses. He thought about her small apartment, with its mismatched furniture and genuine warmth, about the way she'd looked at him like he was someone worth knowing, about the terrible irony that she was falling in love with the man he was pretending to be, rather than the man he actually was. Back in his mansion, Alex sat in his study surrounded by the trappings of success that suddenly felt like prison bars. On his desk was a photo of his parents from the early days of Sterling Technologies, when they were young and hungry and building something meaningful. They looked happy in a way that had nothing to do with money. Alex pulled out his phone and stared at Jessica's contact information. He could text her right now, ask her to meet him tomorrow, tell her the truth about who he was. But the memory of her bitter words about her former boss, about the kind of man she'd learned to despise, stopped him. Instead, he opened his laptop and began researching something he'd never considered before: what it would actually take to become a Mason. If he was going to live this lie, maybe he could make it partially true. Maybe he could learn to build something with his hands, something real and lasting. As the night wore on and the city slept around him, Alex Sterling began to wonder if the man he was pretending to be might actually be the man he was meant to become. The question was whether he'd have the courage to find out before he lost the only woman who had ever made him want to be better than he was. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of double lives and growing deception. Alex found himself living 2 completely separate existences. By day, he was Alexander Sterling, tech mogul attending board meetings. By evening and weekend, he transformed into Alex Stone, the humble Mason falling deeper in love with Jessica Thompson. He had actually started taking masonry classes at City College of San Francisco, slipping away during lunch breaks to learn about mortar consistency and brick-laying techniques. His hands began developing calluses. His instructor, Tony Benedetti, seemed impressed by Alex's dedication. "Most of these rich kids take 1 class and quit when they realize it's actual work," Tony had said. "But you keep showing up. You got the hands for it." The masonry classes served a dual purpose. They made his stories to Jessica more believable, and they gave him something he'd never experienced: the satisfaction of creating something real. But the web of lies, was becoming increasingly complex. The crisis came on a Tuesday morning that started like any other. Alex was in his office on the 42nd floor of Sterling Tower, reviewing quarterly reports, when Margaret knocked on his door with an expression of barely contained excitement. "Mr. Sterling, I have wonderful news. San Francisco Business Journal wants to do a feature story on you for their 30 under 40 issue. They're calling you one of the most eligible bachelors in the tech industry." Alex's stomach dropped. When would this be published? "Next week. They want to do a photo shoot today at your home in Pacific Heights, something about showcasing successful young entrepreneurs and their lifestyles." "Cancel it," Alex said immediately. Margaret blinked in surprise. "Sir, this is exactly the kind of publicity we've been trying to generate for the IPO launch." "I said cancel it, Margaret. No interviews, no photo shoots." "But Mr. Sterling, no exceptions. And Margaret, I want you to pull all my photos from the company website. Marketing materials, press releases, everything." Margaret stared at him as if he'd lost his mind. "Sir, may I ask why?" Alex couldn't exactly explain that he was terrified his girlfriend would see his real identity splashed across a magazine. "Privacy concerns. Just do it." After Margaret left, looking thoroughly confused, Alex sat at his desk, staring out at the city. How long could he maintain this charade? Every day brought new complications, new opportunities for his carefully constructed world to collapse. His phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Can't wait for tonight. I have a surprise for you." They had plans to attend a community art show in the Mission District, another event that would have been completely foreign to Alex's previous life, but had become the highlight of his week. These simple pleasures, walking through galleries, talking to local artists, sharing churros from a street vendor, had become more meaningful to him than any business triumph. That evening, Alex met Jessica at her apartment, where she greeted him with enthusiasm that made his guilt-ridden heart skip. "I have something to show you," she said, practically bouncing with excitement. She led him to her living room, where she had painted a portrait of him from their day at the farmer's market. She had captured him examining tomatoes with focused attention, but what struck Alex most was his expression. Peaceful, content, authentic. "Jessica, this is incredible," he said, genuinely moved. "When did you do this?" "I've been working on it for weeks. I wanted to capture how you look when you're really present, really yourself." "There's something else," Jessica said nervously. "I entered this painting in the art show tonight. I wanted to share how I see you with the world." Alex felt the blood drain from his face. "You're displaying this? Tonight?" The art show was held in a converted warehouse in the Mission District. Alex stayed close to Jessica, positioning himself so that he had a clear view of anyone approaching her painting. For the first hour, everything went smoothly. Then he saw her. Catherine Morrison, arts columnist for the San Francisco Chronicle and a regular at society events Alex attended in his real life. She was standing in front of Jessica's painting, studying it with intense focus. They walked through the Mission District afterward, and Alex tried to focus on the moment, but Catherine Morrison's suspicious gaze haunted him. "Alex, can I ask you something?" Jessica said as they sat on a bench in Dolores Park. "Anything. Are you happy? I mean really happy with your life, your work, everything?" Alex considered the question seriously. "I'm happier now than I've been in years," he said, and it was true. "What changed?" "You," Alex said simply. "Meeting you made me realize I'd been living my life wrong." "Jessica, if you found out that someone you cared about wasn't exactly who you thought they were, what would you do?" Jessica was quiet for a long moment. "I guess it would depend on why they weren't being honest. If they were trying to hurt me or use me, that would be unforgivable. But if they were scared or trying to protect themselves, I think I'd want to understand why. And if they were ashamed of who they really were, then I'd want to help them see themselves the way I see them. Nobody should have to be ashamed of who they are." His phone buzzed with a text from David. "Emergency board meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. The investors are getting antsy. Where have you been?" The real world was calling, demanding his attention, reminding him that Alexander Sterling had responsibilities that Alex Stone could never understand. He was trapped between two lives, and he couldn't maintain both much longer. That night, Alex lay awake in his mansion, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, he would return to board meetings and investor calls. But tonight, he allowed himself to imagine a different life, one where he could wake up every morning as the man Jessica had painted, peaceful and present and free from the golden cage he'd built around himself. The emergency board meeting lasted 4 grueling hours. Alex sat at the head of the mahogany table, listening to investors express concerns about the delayed IPO. The familiar stress of corporate life settled on his shoulders like a lead blanket. "Alexander, we need you focused," said Richard Blackstone, the lead investor. "These delays are costing us credibility." "I understand the concerns," Alex replied, but his mind kept drifting to Jessica's painting, to the peaceful expression she'd captured. After the board members left, Alex called David and told him everything about his double life. David listened without interruption, his expression cycling through disbelief and concern. "Tell her the truth, obviously," David said when Alex finished. "She'll hate me, Dave. She thinks guys like us are everything wrong with the world." "You don't know that you'll lose her. You're assuming the worst because you're scared." That evening, Alex met Jessica at their Italian restaurant in North Beach. She looked beautiful in a simple dress, and his heart ached knowing this might be their last dinner together. "Jessica, I need to tell you something," he said over dessert. Something in his tone made her put down her fork. "That sounds serious." "I haven't been completely honest with you about who I am. My name isn't really Alex Stone, it's Alexander Sterling." Jessica blinked, processing the information. "Sterling? Like the tower downtown?" "Yes, I own Sterling Technologies. I'm not a Mason. Well, I am now, sort of, but I wasn't when we met." Jessica stared at him, her expression unreadable. "You're telling me you're a millionaire tech CEO?" "I wasn't trying to manipulate you. I was tired of women only being interested in my money." "You're exactly the kind of man I was trying to avoid," Jessica said, her voice rising slightly. "You're exactly like my old boss. The person you fell for does exist. These past few weeks, I've been more myself than I've ever been. How am I supposed to believe anything you say now?" Jessica's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Because I love you." The words hung in the air between them. Jessica's expression softened slightly, but the hurt remained. "You love me, or you love the idea of me?" "I love you, Jessica. The real you. Your kindness, your passion, the way you make me want to be better." "I need time to think about this," Jessica said finally, standing up. "Of course. I understand. You took away my choice. Let me figure out who you really want to be first." The next morning, Alex walked into the Sterling Technologies boardroom wearing jeans and a flannel shirt. The board members stared in shock as he outlined his proposal. He would step down as CEO, maintaining only a minority stake. The majority of his shares would be sold, with proceeds going to create the Sterling Foundation for affordable housing and job training. "You're talking about giving away hundreds of millions of dollars," Richard said, his face pale. "I'm talking about using those millions to build something that matters." "And what will you do?" Alex thought about Tony Benedetti's weathered hands, about the satisfaction he'd found in creating something real. "I'm going to learn a trade. I'm going to build things with my hands." It took 3 months to execute the transition. Alex threw himself into his masonry classes, volunteering with Habitat for Humanity, discovering the joy of creating homes for families who needed them. He sold his mansion and moved to a modest apartment in the Mission District. Tony Benedetti offered him a job at his construction company. His first paycheck was smaller than what he used to spend on wine in a week, but it was money he'd earned with his hands. One Saturday morning in December, Alex was working on a housing project when he saw her. Jessica was touring the affordable housing development with a neighborhood group. She stopped when she saw him, wearing work clothes that were actually dirty, his hands showing real calluses, his face peaceful. "Alex," she said softly. "Hi, Jessica." She looked around at the construction site, at the foundation he was helping to build, at the sign reading, "Sterling Foundation Community Housing Project." "You really did it," she said, wonder in her voice. "You actually became the person I thought you were. I became the person I wanted to be. The person you helped me see I could be." They talked for hours that day, walking through the Mission District. Jessica told him about the months of confusion and hurt, about slowly understanding that his deception had come from fear, not malice. "I have something for you," Jessica said as they sat in Dolores Park, watching the sunset. She handed him a photograph of her painting, the portrait of him at the farmer's market, looking peaceful and real. "I wanted you to remember who you really are," she said. "I love you," he said, the words easier now, honest and unafraid. "I love you too," Jessica replied, "the real you." 6 months later, they were married in a small ceremony at the Japanese tea garden, surrounded by friends who loved them for who they truly were. The wedding was simple but perfect: fresh flowers from the farmer's market, music from local musicians. Alex and Jessica built their life together, one honest day at a time. They bought a small Victorian house in the Mission District, which Alex renovated with his own hands. Jessica opened her yoga studio. Every Saturday they visited the farmer's market together. Alex had learned that the strongest foundations weren't made of money or success, but of honesty, courage, and the willingness to build something real, one stone at a time. "Walking away from what I've built. I'm walking toward what I want to build." It took 3 months to execute the transition. Alex worked with lawyers and accountants to ensure that Sterling Technologies would continue to thrive under new leadership, that his employees would be protected, that his parents' legacy would be honored even as he chose a different path. During those months, he didn't contact Jessica. He threw himself into his masonry classes, learning the ancient art of building with stone and mortar. He volunteered with Habitat for Humanity, discovering the joy of creating homes for families who needed them. He sold his mansion in Pacific Heights and moved to a modest apartment in the Mission District, 3 blocks from the farmer's market, where his transformation had begun. Tony Benedetti offered him a job at his construction company, and Alex accepted eagerly. His first paycheck was smaller than what he used to spend on wine in a week, but it was money he'd earned with his hands, his back, his honest labor. One Saturday morning in December, Alex was working on a housing project in the Mission when he saw her. Jessica was walking through the construction site with a group from the neighborhood association, touring the affordable housing development that the Sterling Foundation was funding. She stopped when she saw him, wearing work clothes that were actually dirty, his hands showing the calluses of real labor, his face peaceful in a way she'd captured in her painting months earlier. "Alex," she said softly. "Hi, Jessica." She looked around at the construction site, at the foundation he was helping to build, at the sign that read, "Sterling Foundation Community Housing Project." "You really did it," she said, wonder in her voice. "You actually became the person I thought you were. I became the person I wanted to be, the person you helped me see I could be." They talked for hours that day, walking through the Mission District that had become Alex's home, past the farmer's market where they'd first shared strawberries, past the cafe where they'd had their first real conversation. Jessica told him about the months of confusion and hurt, about slowly understanding that his deception had come from fear, not malice. Alex told her about the joy he'd found in simple work, about the peace that came from living authentically. "I have something for you," Jessica said as they sat in Dolores Park, watching the sunset paint the city in gold and pink. She handed him a small wrapped package. Inside was a photograph of her painting, the portrait of him at the farmer's market, looking peaceful and present and real. "I wanted you to remember who you really are," she said, "in case you ever forget again." Alex looked at the photograph, seeing himself through her eyes, not as a successful businessman or a wealthy heir, but as a man finding joy in simple moments. "I love you," he said, the words easier now, honest and unafraid. "I love you too," Jessica replied, "the real you. All of you, the scared millionaire and the brave mason and everything in between." They kissed as the sun set over San Francisco, 2 people who had found each other by being brave enough to be themselves. Around them, the city pulsed with life, families enjoying picnics, artists painting landscapes, couples building their own small stories of love and hope. 6 months later, Alex and Jessica were married in a small ceremony at the Japanese tea garden in Golden Gate Park, surrounded by friends and family, who loved them for who they truly were. The wedding was simple but perfect. Fresh flowers from the farmer's market, music from local musicians, a reception at the Italian restaurant in North Beach where Alex had finally told the truth. Rosa cried during the ceremony, and Tony Benedetti gave a toast about the importance of building strong foundations. David served as best man, telling embarrassing stories about Alex's early attempts at yoga, while Frank Murphy, the old mason whose wisdom had started Alex's transformation, shared a blessing about love being the strongest mortar of all. Alex and Jessica built their life together one honest day at a time. They bought a small Victorian house in the Mission District, which Alex renovated with his own hands, installing custom stonework that would last for generations. Jessica opened her yoga studio, teaching the art of finding balance to students who came seeking peace in a chaotic world. Every Saturday, they visited the farmer's market together, buying strawberries from Maria Santos, who always asked when they were going to give her great-grandchildren to spoil. They took sunrise yoga classes at Crissy Field, watching the Golden Gate Bridge emerge from the fog like a daily miracle. They built something real and lasting, not just a marriage, but a life filled with authentic moments and genuine connection. And sometimes, when the morning light was just right and Jessica was teaching a class on the beach, Alex would catch sight of his reflection in her studio mirror and see the man from her painting, peaceful, present, and finally, truly himself. The Sterling Foundation continued to thrive, funding housing projects and job training programs throughout San Francisco. But Alex's greatest creation wasn't measured in dollars or square footage. It was measured in morning conversations over coffee made in their small kitchen, in evening walks through their neighborhood, in the simple joy of a love built on truth rather than fantasy. He had learned that the strongest foundations weren't made of money or success, but of honesty, courage, and the willingness to build something real, one stone at a time.